just as we so like I said, it is just a couple minutes past 8. So we're gonna dive right in as everybody else continues to hop on. But want to get started. Wanted to do this one a little bit later in the evening, just in case we do have some people in other time zones. As you know, the Peggy Kirk Bell Tour has continued to grow and expand its reach. We know we're getting families from the central time zone all the way even to the West Coast time zone. So try to get this one a little bit later. Did one earlier today. They didn't go out through the Peggy Kirk Bell Tour. This one just went out through my platform about supporting the parents through the process. Had a few people on that one earlier. If anybody happened to want that recording, shoot me a message, let me know. I can share that recording with you as well. Always just trying to kind of put things out through different avenues. But I'm going to switch over and share my screen so that we can dive in. And then what we'll do is we're just going to hit a few points of starting the recruiting process, just knock out a few kind of initial steps of the process. If we have some time at the end to ask some questions through the chat box, I will do my best without having this go too long, but then I'll kind of give you a couple ways that we could actually discuss some of those questions. But let me switch over to share my screen. All right, should just see this one. Hopefully you're just seeing this screen. May not be the full screen, but that's all right. All right, so as we said, our goal here is, and I know some of y'all may be coming into this, and you might be a little bit farther into the process, so you may not quite grasp, or you may be a little bit beyond this, but I will be doing a second webinar probably in the next couple of weeks where we'll start diving into a couple of the more specific areas later into the process. Those actually all steps of the process really get into more details, but we kind of start to split those into talking a little more specifically about coach communications and then visits. And so that kind of then breaks it down into its own webinar itself. But the goal with this one is really talking about the initial few steps of understanding the process and how to just kind of start the process and understand just the initial few pieces. But first, let me backtrack a little bit because sometimes I start talking and realize a lot of you don't even know me, don't know who I am. Not that I just assume everybody does, but sometimes I feel like I am here, there, and everywhere. I'm not on site as much for the PKB events as I used to be, just because I do a lot of stuff more remote. I do have one of my former girls who's working for me right now. I'm trying to get her integrated into stuff. It's a little easier said than done. But she's been working with me this year. She's been out on site. That's Grayson. So she's been out on site with me a few times. The travel is just a little bit tougher. So some of y'all might not have seen my face out as much, but I will be out at a few events. I'll be at Invitational. I usually go to Pine Needles right after Christmas. I'm usually at that event and maybe at one other one. So I'm usually out once a month and then or about every other month, and then do one or two webinars as well. But I've been partnered with the PKB since about 2010. So I've had Brandi Jackson Goff since 2011. So I've been working with the girls, consulting them through this process for over 12 years, or right at 12 years now. Worked for kind of another recruiting service company in between playing full-time and then starting my business. But I played collegiate golf at Furman University, had a pretty decent junior, senior year, and was an All-American, finished runner-up U.S. Women's Am, came out, got my full LPGA tour card. Was not ready when I got out there, was very just not ready maturity-wise. My golf game was, but just maturity-wise, so much about that, I was not ready for it. Bounced back and forth between the LPGA Tour and what is now the Epson Tour. And probably after about 8 years, I actually did not plan to give it up, was going to keep playing, and started doing what I'm doing now. And that just really kind of, I just really enjoyed it, and the opportunity to, just start working with the young ladies and to take this on and do this just really was something that I really just enjoyed doing. And I started to see what I lacked in my career was not just the golf physical piece, but it was this this almost professional, personal side of things as well that you can really develop through the recruiting side of things, and learning how to talk for yourself and ask questions and grow and mature and be challenged through this process. So that's a lot of what I enjoy with this. So that's a big part of what I do with the girls, along with the recruiting side of things that I did not have at that age, did not develop it as a teenager, and really just lacked it throughout all of college and even as a professional golfer out there trying to make a living. So again, very, very small little synopsis. This is me, my family. That's my dog, Maddie. I love training and working out and doing competitions with that. Again, I'm a foster dog mom. So that's just me in a little bit of a nutshell. And again, I've been with the Peggy Kirkbride Girls Tour for about 10, 11 years of my business and love it. And I'm just grateful for this chance to kind of chat with you all and talk a little bit about the process. So let's dive into this. So listen, these are kind of the 5 main topics we're going to talk about tonight. Going to dive into each one, give you a few little insights into these, and then we'll just briefly talk about the second half of the process at the end, and then we'll wrap it up. So, and actually this, in this picture is Grayson Burgess, who, like I said, has been working with me this year to try to help some of the younger girls. She played collegiate golf at Clemson, got her undergrad and her master's, was a player of the year here in South Carolina, had a really good junior career. This was me caddying for her at the U.S. Junior Girls, back several years ago. All right, so a couple of things, some dates to know. So this is one that just passed. That was a big deal for the 2025 recruiting class. So obviously, I'm sure we have girls of all different ages on here. But for the 2025 recruiting class, which would be your rising juniors, the big kind of kickoff to the recruiting process is on June 15th. That's when coaches can first contact you. That's when they can send you emails, they can call you, they can text you. Any kind of electronic communication is allowed at that time. Video chats, messages through social media, all of that is allowed starting on June 15th. There's definitely things you need to be doing prior to that time, especially if you are a higher ranked recruit. If you're top 100, 150 in your recruiting class in the country, especially, they're going to expect you to have been proactively getting in touch with them prior to that time, letting them know who you are, letting them know you're interested. If you're not a strong recruit at that time, it's kind of hit or miss as to how much you should be doing up to that point. Definitely one thing you see is that June 15th date, and the 6 months after that is very top heavy. It is very top ranked programs, top ranked recruits. It kind of comes and goes pretty quick with them. So I've got a handful of girls that I'm working with in each recruiting class. It's that way. A lot of activity happens. A lot of coaches go out and watch them that summer. You see girls commit during that time, the summer into the fall. They take their visits, they make their decision. And yes, the process wraps up for them. Your top 50, 75 programs in the country, and your top 75, top 100 players in that particular recruiting class. There's a good chance a lot of them will make their decisions during that time period. And by the end of that calendar year, 10% to maybe 20% at most, probably, of that year's recruiting class will potentially make their verbal commitment. But when you look at things as a whole, and you look at all girls that are going to play college golf from that recruiting class, majority actually do not actually really see the biggest activity of the process make their commitments until all throughout junior year and into summer going into their senior year. So definitely something to keep in mind. It's really been a struggle trying to get everybody to see that and understand that. Be proactive enough, but yet not just stress yourself out and start so early and expect to make it happen when your scores and your game's just not quite there yet for where the coaches are with the process either. So again, that's really a whole explanation, very player specific with that, but just something I wanted to touch on as we talk about that date. And then starting on August 1st of your junior year, that's when visits are allowed to start happening. You can go to campus, You can actually meet with the coaches. They can be official or unofficial. Difference there, obviously, is being paid for and not paid for. A lot of different kind of details within that and how those are handled. Again, very specific within that. But the whole main point is at that point, you can actually meet with the coaches when you're on campus. You can always go take academic tours. You can walk around, and if you happen to know where the facilities are, you can go walk around and check them out, but you cannot actually meet with a coach or anybody in the athletic department prior to August 1st of your junior year. But then once that date comes, yes, if you're lucky enough, or I don't like to use the word lucky, if you're a good enough player and you're being recruited by the programs that have the budgets that want you as one of their top recruits, then more than likely they will pay for you to come on official visits and you'll get to do that whole process. Not everybody gets to do that. A lot of people do still have to rely on unofficial visits. Potentially doing that, or not even getting to do those visits during the fall. They don't come until later in the year. And again, a lot of them are going to maybe come as unofficial visits throughout junior year. Coaches can make off-campus contact with the recruits and their parents. So at tournaments, different things like that, that contact starts to become allowed as well. They're limited, though, to how much they can do. So a lot of times I do always say, be respectful of the coaches. A lot of times coaches are at tournaments and they don't want to just sit there and chat and carry on. They're there to watch, evaluate, and recruit. It's okay to speak, be nice, be friendly, but sometimes just respect them and their time and kind of let them be the ones that lead that conversation. Some coaches are really chatty and they don't mind. Others don't. They kind of really like to just stay in their little zone in their world. They're watching. They want to be able to do that. They're not as chatty and friendly. So just keep that in mind. And again, every time they do talk, a lot of times that means they have to use that as like a contact, and they're limited on some of those. So a couple things just to keep in mind as far as dates and a few things with that. Some things to do. Eligibility center is a big thing. They did make it several years ago that make it a little bit easier to where you can go in and just start to build your profile. So you don't actually have to pay to register yet. So you can start building it, start entering all of your stuff. That way, just in case you don't play Division I or Division II, so in case you go to just a Division III school, or if you were to go to an NAIA school, or you end up just not playing college athletics at all, then you don't actually have to pay the registration fee when it's all said and done. But once you do get to a point that you are being recruited by a D1 or a D2 school, you will then have to pay the registration fee to get your actual number and have all your stuff registered. And if you do get ready to take the ACT or the SAT, same thing. Obviously nowadays, a lot of schools are test optional, so that comes into play as well. But you will want to go ahead and get registered and at least start the process with the eligibility center. And then there comes a time where you will need to actually pay the registration fee. And then all of that gets finalized during spring of senior year. But you always want to make sure you're on track. And again, as you start getting ready to take visits, especially if they're official visits, that then does become required to be registered and actually pay the fee to start going through the clearing house kind of part of what that is, making sure everything's right. And again, like I said, if you're already planning to take the ACT or the SAT, then it makes it a whole lot easier if you're already registered, because then your scores will get sent directly to the center versus having to request them. You're only allowed so many times to do that before you have to start paying for the official copies. So same thing as well there. And again, if you know you're going to schools potentially that aren't test optional, or you know for sure you're going to take the ACT, SAT, the earlier you can take it, sometimes the easier it makes the process. Coaches know that you've got the scores required for what they need, or required for certain academic money that they may be able to get you. That has definitely drastically changed since COVID. It's a much tougher kind of thing to figure out, because do you want to take it, turn your scores in if the school, and obviously you're not just looking at schools from an academic perspective, you have to take into account the schools golf wise. So it's a very kind of confusing piece there now post COVID, and the fact that schools did not all go back to test required, some are test optional. But if you plan to take it and can take it, trying to take it a little bit earlier as an athlete, a lot of times will help from a recruiting perspective. Up next is the amount of scholarships that are available. Talk about this pretty quick. Because the next slide breaks this down. So this just tells you the amount that is available. So just leave this up, but then the next slide, I always end up talking about it and then realize the next slide actually explains it. So that I don't double up. 6 at Division I, 5.4 at Division II, academic scholarships only at Division III, 5 at NAIA, and 8 at junior college. All right, so here's the big thing that is the most surprising thing that everybody continues to not understand, that even I didn't necessarily know, but have definitely learned. Not all teams are fully funded. So that's 6 scholarships at the Division I level. That is just the maximum that is allowed. So there are as much as 20 to maybe 30% of Division I schools across the country that do not have all 6 scholarships fully funded. I know, Sarah, I know not all of them. I know a lot of them that aren't, just from having done this as long as I have. I know it through the coaches telling me. I know it through the families I've worked with who have told me. There are some very well-known schools, some very well-known academic schools that may only have 1 scholarship that is divided up among the entire team. So that means if they equally divide it up and they have, 6 girls on the team, whatever that math is, 20, 30%, 15%, or whatever it is, 10, 15% that each girl is going to get. That's it. And that's all they have. And that's not per year. That's not, that is 1 scholarship for all the girls on the team at one time. Now, plenty of schools are fully funded. Majority, I would say the majority are. I would say, like I said, there's probably 70% or so are fully funded. And then actually within that 70%, you probably got half of those that are state schools who also theoretically have, in a way, 10 scholarships, because if you're in state, or in some cases, those in-state schools will allow even out-of-state kids' schools as athletes to qualify for in-state money, or they get so much academic money. Now, they're not giving away that many quote unquote athletic scholarships, but they're so easily able to get you academic money that already gives you a half of a scholarship academic, to where they're only having to give each girl a 50% athletic, so that they're basically able to kind of give the really good players who just have pretty good academics 100% scholarship, because it's 50-50 athletic and academics, which is also where you have to understand. You get a lot of people out there talking about, oh, I'm going on a full scholarship. There's a really good chance a lot of times that quote unquote full scholarship is not a full golf scholarship, that is actually half academic, half golf. There's a lot of schools, again, without being able to share the places and the names or whatever, there's some big time Power 5 conferences that have some of the best players in the country playing for them that are actually on only 50% golf, because they're just good enough academically that they automatically qualified for 50% academic. And a coach is not going to just waste athletic money that they already qualify for academic money. So they're basically giving them a full athletic because they already qualify for 50% academic right off the bat. So again, things like that, keep in mind. But again, there's teams that are not fully funded. And oftentimes it tends to be some of your better academic schools sometimes, because the schools itself, those athletic programs aren't necessarily making money. And so some of the money from the school is funded more into academic programs, not necessarily into the athletic department, different reasons. But those numbers are just what the teams are allowed, or that's the maximum that they're allowed to have. There's different reasons, all these different things. It's not like a public knowledge. There's not like some page you can go look or Google. It's not like a public thing. It's not something that you always want to just ask the coach outright, but it is something, if it is a concern, it is definitely something before you would travel. There are definitely times and places to have these discussions, just to have an idea. Again, this is something we definitely talk about quite a bit with the families I work with, to kind of know some of these things, because you don't want to waste anybody's time if you find out that, like, hey, there's going to be absolutely no scholarship available and we can't afford this tuition. So, but it is a very, very big misled kind of myth that like there's all these scholarships, assuming that all the scholarships are fully funded, but not to just put such a dark cloud over it. But it is probably a little more than some people realize. I said I would probably say out of a little over 200, 230-ish, I think, D1 programs. I mean, like I said, I'd probably say 20%. So I'd say there's probably at least about 40 to maybe 50 programs out there that have anywhere from 0 to 5, would probably be just a very rough estimate, just off the top of my head, what I know, and then the ones that I probably don't know about, somewhere in that range. But again, some probably have 4 or 5. They're not fully funded, but they don't have that one either. But then there are some that actually don't have any at all. But anything that's less than 6 would just consider them not fully funded. But yeah, some we're working on 2 or 4, or 4.5 or 5 or something like that. So again, I'd say somewhere between that 30, 40, 50-ish maybe would be a random number out of the, I think it's 230 D1 programs, maybe 300. My brain starts not working after 8 o'clock at night. Anyways, okay. Enough of that. But again, full rides are definitely more common among females than the males, but they are still harder to come by. Definitely just full, athletic. And then just in general, just the whole concept of full scholarships in general, even if you are combining athletics and golf, it's still a whole lot harder than people think. The myth about all this scholarship money, because when you start adding all these factors that these girls are looking for, especially versus the boys who are a little more flexible on, hey, if you tell a guy, you can go to this school that's only got 700 kids, that's 45 minutes from the closest restaurants and shopping, but you get to play golf every day for free, and you get to hit golf balls, and you get to do this and this, and there's enough guys out there that they're willing to go do that. There's a lot of girls that's like, hey, I think I'd just rather go to this school and not play golf. So that's where there's some of this misconception that some of these scholarships do go unused, is girls have a little more expectation for what they want out of their college experience, academically what they want. So when you start adding some of these parameters and they have certain criteria they're looking for, and then maybe golf scores don't quite match what that criteria is looking for, all of this starts to get a whole lot harder. Tuition costs at certain schools come into play with that. It just all starts to get a little bit tougher than it seems. So, which again, why the more realistic you are, the better chance you might actually get some of that golf money, and just the better chance that you are of having any sort of offer at all. Keep in mind, D3 schools, some people do get a little bit worried about the D3 schools and thinking financially you can't afford it because they don't offer the golf money. They can actually offer some pretty good financial aid for athletes, just because they are usually able to pull some better funding to try to help encourage athletes to come there versus just the regular students that would be looking to go there. So do keep that in mind. It still may not be doable at some of the D3 schools that are really higher tuition, but don't totally disregard it and not even consider it until you at least kind of find that out. So, all right, please keep in mind, this is just a very general, best as possible. I actually have adjusted this since the very first time I did this, like legitimately like 13 years ago when I worked for the recruiting company, and made it as simple as possible because it used to have a whole lot of other parameters. But this is a very simple outline of what the standards would be for the different programs. But there are so many exceptions to this. There are so many kind of variables. And like I said, it really is just taking this down to the bare bones of what it kind of does look like. So this is just kind of some of the standards. I mean, low 70s averages really is what a lot of your top D1s are looking for. I mean, I continue to get emails back from coaches or players that get emails back from coaches that say, we're looking for, below 75 average. Even if you go look at their roster, I mean, this is what you continue to get from them. Then you get into the lower D1s. It's still pretty strong, but there's a little more flexibility there. Top D1s, you've got some really competitive top D1s that fall into that kind of mid-range D1 level, where they still shoot 73, 74, 75. But you start to just fall out of that top 20 D1 and it falls off a little bit quicker. Kind of same thing with top D3. You've got some programs that do get some pretty strong girls, but same thing. Your fourth and fifth player on a lot of top D3 programs falls off pretty quick outside of the top 10, top 15 programs. And a lot of it is the types of tournaments you're playing, national versus regionals, which where we talk again about, really top D1 level really looks at, are you playing at a national level? There's definitely some areas, the Carolinas has great tournaments. It's really nice and convenient to be able to stay in the Carolinas and play. Sometimes it does hurt a little bit from a recruiting perspective, because if you don't get outside of the area and get into some of the big national tournaments, sometimes some coaches will say, hey, how are they going to play when they do start playing these other courses and you start playing against all these international girls and all of these big tournaments and, different conditions and not these same courses that you've been playing, kind of consistently, year after year of all these events. Because that's kind of some of what they start to look for is, just different conditions and getting used to that, because that's what those top D1 programs look for. So again, a very general reference, but I do like to just include this as a little bit of a reference there. It's definitely more about tournament scores versus handicap. Handicap doesn't have anything to do from a recruiting perspective. Coaches unfortunately don't care about handicap. They, they don't know where the handicap comes from, what it's based on. They want to know your tournament scores. And, tournament scores really from high school golf doesn't matter. They like to know that you're playing high school golf. They like to see that you're playing in a team. They do like some of those updates. You just can't expect high school golf to carry much weight from a recruiting perspective. And, more than just a few scores at those numbers that they're looking for, the really consistency over time at those averages that I'm showing you, and kind of the strength of your tournament schedule for what are you playing, what distances are you playing, what level are you playing at, really dictates it as well. If you only throw one or two of those numbers in, again, that's where kind of that average experience types of tournaments, those are all different things that they look at when they look at a resume and really kind of see, okay, just what are we really looking at as a whole? And of course, the earlier that you reach those standards has a big impact on where you fall as well. Because if you don't get to being in those low 70s or mid 70s until, senior year, then, there's some programs that do come back later in the process needing players. Typically, that's not usually with a lot of scholarship money. It might just be that preferred walk-on spot because they did maybe lose a player or they're willing to take on one more spot. But if you're there as, freshman and sophomore, coaches identify those players early on. They keep their eye on them. They'll go out and watch them a little bit at tournaments. When that June 15th date gets there, they're planning to watch them. So those, players who are there early, again, yes, I know a lot of people talk about late bloomers and then the reverse side of burnout. There's all those factors to consider for sure. Players who hit their stride a little bit later, lots of factors in there. But of course, when you get to those numbers a little bit earlier, then yes, you have the higher chance of being picked up by those higher ranked programs when that process kicks in the June 15th. And if you don't get to it till a little bit later, it dictates, that level of play is a little bit later than, is a little bit lower than what it would look like. So, and again, exceptions at all division levels for sure, as far as like, this girl had this, her tournament average is higher than mine and she went here, and those things come into factor for sure as well too. Just always got to keep that in mind. All right, talk a little bit about the first kind of two main steps of getting started with the actual process, which is building your resume and just contacting the coaches. So this is really kind of the first two, just throwing yourself out there basically. So get asked a lot about building a resume. I'm going to go to the second part and then back up to the first part. So the first part is kind of how to format it. Because there's tons of ways you can format a resume. There are online services. Junior Golf Scoreboard has one. It's a fee that you do pay every year. It's $180 maybe or so. It lets you put in all the information. If you've played a lot of 2-day tournaments that are Junior Golf Scoreboard ranked and you haven't been keeping up with it, it'll populate all that for you. It saves you that time if that means something to you. It gives you a PDF version. The only negative to it is it doesn't really, you think you can link straight to it, but you actually can't. The only way coaches can get to it is either you attach the PDF to your emails, or you just kind of got to tell them, hey, my resume is in Junior Golf Scoreboard, because they've got to be logged in and go search your resume. A little bit of a hassle. Coaches kind of know that. Probably the only drawback is just because it's protected within their system as a login. It's not like a public thing. So you just got to know you can't copy and paste the hyperlink and think coaches can click on it and get to it. So you just always want to download the updated PDF, attach that to your resume, or attach that to your email. The actual resume itself within Junior Golf Scoreboard, coaches all have accounts. They just have to be logged into their account and search for it that way to actually find it. So that's maybe the only downside to that one. And then just the cost of it, because you can easily do your own. There's not a lot of benefit, to be honest, to some of the paid stuff. Coaches aren't really searching for them a whole lot. They're looking at stuff through their email. They're relying on credible references for sure when they get them from people that they know and they trust, that are attached and follow up. I mean, they want it from you as the player first, for sure. They're looking for that. But they do rely on credible sources to follow up and say, hey, whether it's your swing coach, whether it's somebody like myself, that does. But as far as them going out to recruiting services or to, search engines, your D1 coaches especially are not going out to search for players. They're finding them themselves for the most part. So do keep that in mind. So doing it yourself, whether it's doing your own website or just a basic document format, is 100% acceptable. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no drawback. There's no reason not to do it that way and save the money. As long as it's accessible, it's complete, it's neat. It includes, which is what I have listed above, a completed tournament resume, a chart that looks good, has your academics, your upcoming schedule. Kind of just depends on where you're at with that. If you don't have all of that complete yet, that's okay. You can put a note that says we'll update, send schedule later. That can be a follow-up email. That's okay. But any kind of awards, activities, volunteer work, other sports you played, a good personal statement about who you are, depending on how your intro email is written. Swing video is always great. A really good edited recruiting video with a good intro that you present yourself, you introduce yourself, is a really good piece to have in there. Your social media links, if you're using social media, any of your stats, if you've got TrackMan numbers, carry yardages, swing speed, any of that kind of stuff is always great to include. References, include your parents' name, those kinds of things, your swing coach, high school coach, any of that they can contact, and then your own contact info. There's a couple of little tidbits here and there that you can include. That's the main gist of it. One of the main ones is that tournament chart. Couple of different ways of kind of making it, but it needs to be easy to see, easy for the coaches to read, easy on their eyes, have your results, how the tournament name, the date, your scores, ideally how you finished within the tournament, second out of 40. Not 100% necessary to have that, but it does help so that they know where you finished within the field, the yardage you played. That's a bare minimum that you need to have as far as that goes. It's crazy when resumes come in or people send me the resumes they're sending out and there's not a single tournament score on there. That's ultimately really what coaches need to first assess you with. It's one thing to tell them what your scoring average is. They don't want to have to search. If they've got to go Google and search you, and especially if they then find out that your average that you're telling them doesn't match it up, or if you try to tell them and send them to a bunch of different links, or anything, the more work you give for them to have to figure out who you are as a golfer. I mean, you've got to make it easy and just clean and simple. These coaches don't have a lot of time. They're looking at things very quick. Things need to be easy on their eyes and just very simple. I just cannot reiterate that. So here's just a couple of examples. So this is just I need to make this look a little bit better and I need to make it more interactive, but the left side is like a home page if you wanted to create something through like Wix.com. So it'd be a very simple, keep in mind, if you're going to create a website as a resume, think of it as a resume. Don't think of it. They don't want full-blown websites that have all of your every article, everything you've ever done, and all these pictures. They don't, that's great if you want to have one of those for like your own, marketing purposes. But when you're trying to get something to a coach, if they have a hard time finding what they need from a resume perspective, again, you're going to lose them. So these would just be some of the tabs at the top that you could have. Keeping it simple. Like I said, I don't have this one set to be interactive. But again, this is something that I kind of give all of my girls the option. I really like for the girls I work with to do these themselves. I'm here to help them. I give them the templates, give them the ways to do it. Again, plus they have this information, so I don't have it. So they're going to have to plug it all in anyways. So on the right side is just kind of a basic formatted PDF document. It's okay if it's 2 pages. You don't have to use the whole like work resume. You should have everything on 1 page. That doesn't apply for this. It's okay if it's 2 or even 3 pages. I always say include pretty much everything from the current year of your tournaments, for current year up to even maybe the year before, especially if it's early in the year, and then just do highlights from the years before. Because a lot of times they need to see, if you only put 1 or 2 tournaments, they don't get a chance to see just how much you've played. And a lot of times the experience you've gotten tells them a lot. How much have you played? How much are you out playing? How much, experience are you getting? Not just your top tournament scores. A lot of times too will tell them. So again, the one on the right is just a 1-page example of what it looked like. And the one on the left is just what a home page, if you did something like through Wix.com, which is a free way of building one, and just what the tabs could look like for that, to keep that very simple. Talk a little bit just about getting started with contacting coaches. So starting out, identifying the schools, research the programs, take notes as you're doing that, because you're going to need the notes. The coaches are going to expect you to, whether when you get on calls with them or when you're getting ready to write the emails, the coaches are going to expect you to know things about the school, about the program. Why are you interested? Why are you reaching out to them? So take notes as you do that. Use those standards that I had on the slide before. It's on my website somewhere, I think. If not, I'll send this. I'll try to make sure I post the standards maybe on my social media. Again, I haven't done that in a while. Check their rosters, try to help determine what's realistic. Keep in mind, for as long as possible throughout the process, coaches are trying to replace at least their second and third best player, because that's how the team gets better. They're not trying to replace their 5th player or their 6th player. They're trying to replace their number 2 and their number 3 player if they can. And they're going to try to do that, especially if they've got scholarship money they're looking to hand out. They're going to stick it out for as long as possible most of the time, until they're able to do that. And it's not really until later on before they may say, all right, like, we really just like you. We see potential if you want to come be a walk-on or something like that. So just keep that in mind. Keep in mind, college tournaments are tougher. So when you're looking to at like the average of freshmen who's maybe, in that 5th player spot, and their average is maybe, 78, they were probably about a 76 average probably as a junior player. And it's just taking them some time to adjust. So some things to keep in mind there too. Always say do a list and initially contact at least 50 or more. Definitely up for debate. I've had some girls who've had to contact 100 or more before they even get enough options because of several different reasons. Yes, there's some girls who are good enough, who don't want to go that far from home, that can keep it in that 10, 15, 20 range, and it works well enough. But that's also really putting it risky. And when I do these webinars, or when I'm putting this out as to the masses, I know how much people say their list is realistic, and then I also know how much I get these consultations and do these, and I see what they think is realistic, or well, I know, so I know that at least typically if I can get most people to go from a list of 20 or so to maybe 50 or more, it forces them to at least maybe add 10 or 15 that's a little bit closer to being realistic. That maybe gives them a little bit of a chance to get a few in there. And then the next slide, I think we'll talk a little bit about, or I may not, I'm not sure if the next one does. But the thing too is it's really frustrating when you get a lot of rejection emails, no emails, just that you never get people that really just say, yeah, we'd really like to talk to you. We've seen you play. Even if it's schools that you really know in the back of your mind that you think you're better than, that you know you're never going to go to, just getting some of those positive responses will build some confidence, will make you feel better. potentially give you some offers that then, as you maybe start getting into some other places, gives you a little bit of leverage too. It just helps build some confidence as well. But if you're not careful, you will spin your wheels at just a handful of schools. Even if you think 20 or 30 is enough and you're not getting very far, that's a big reason why. So definitely keep that in mind. The intro email, they definitely need to be very specific. Sometimes I know that's a little harder if you don't really know a specific reason. Right now, obviously, is a great thing. They've got a lot going on with their season, but always address it specific to the coach at the bare minimum. But as specific as you can, especially, again, when you're really interested in the school, make them as specific as you can. Very well written that reflect who you are as a student, an athlete, and a person. Parents out there, definitely don't write it for them. Review it, look it over, make some suggestions, but make sure it's your daughter who wrote it. It's in her words. Coaches would rather have something that's not perfect, but it is from her and that it reflects her and that they can see that when they speak to her, than something that's perfect or that she didn't write or whatever that might be. So definitely let her be the one that does it. Have the resume attached, direct them to the resume. The resume has a lot more of the facts and the data and all that kind of stuff. And also fill out the questionnaires. This next slide will talk a little bit about kind of a coach's quote about it. Most coaches will tell you they like both. I know it's a hassle. You feel like you're repeating things. But coaches are hit or miss on wanting both. Sometimes the questionnaires have some questions that you may not include. Sometimes coaches, again, they get a lot of emails and resumes that don't have things that they need. So sometimes they will go straight to just look at the questionnaire first and assume she probably didn't, give me what I needed in the resume anyway. So fill out the online questionnaires as well. And then you can follow up or vice versa. Couple of resources for this. Well, what are the resources? But the little box over here says, if they have a genuine interest in a university, it's helpful for the coach to have both a resume and questionnaire on file. The questionnaire is great for preliminary information, and the resume personalized to university and coach. Tell them a specific reason or reasons for their interest in the school is also great. This is from a D1 coach. Again, one of the many reasons that this process is very difficult is all coaches are different. All coaches have their own preferences. All coaches, you'll go to some of these coach panels, and I love doing coach panels, yet I hate doing coach panels because all coaches, different division levels, across the same division levels, have different things they want, different ways of doing things, different things they look at. You ask one coach, well, should we play this tournament? They're this type of tournament. Do you like this? Do you like that? And they're going to answer it totally different. So if you do take everything to mean that's what every coach wants, you will definitely create a lot of anxiety, or you'll miss out on things. It's actually a big reason why I do what I do, is to try to kind of help find the happy medium with some of the stuff. Because it is, but then again, sometimes I even have a hard time because I will have one, to be honest, sometimes I'll have one coach say they want this, and then they'll do that, and then they will have wanted something different, or they'll say, yeah, I'm looking for a player like that does this or does that, or I don't ever want a player that does this or that. And the next thing you see is this other girl commits, and that's everything that she's not, or, whatever it might be. So it's all very tough with that. But for the most part, I'd say majority of coaches out there, if there is a questionnaire on file, would ideally want both. So again, it takes some time to get through it all, but do that. And then a couple of resources. The collegegolf.com is a great search engine. There is a 60, 70, 80, I forget what the fee is now, subscription fee, but is a great way to search college golf programs. It's what I use. I register for it, or they let me register for it. Great way to search for the golf specific programs. You can set all these parameters, play around with it. It's really cool. Golf Stat was always the go-to place for rankings, results, and everything, but they actually are no longer the source for it. It's called, I forgot what it's called. And they actually just had this, they got like this, hacked or something the very first week of doing all the tournaments. They're the new college resource now. And I just went blank on the name, starts with an S. But it's the new college resource for the new college statistics thing. All right, somebody just told me what it is. Hang on. College golf is $99.95 now. So, but it's well worth it. I will tell you that. So that's collegegolf.com. But I can't think of what the starts with an S. But it's a new college resource for tournament results and all that. But it got hacked the first week, so GolfStat's actually covering a good bit. But Golf Week does the rankings as well. So again, really good resource there. College Board's really good, obviously, for the school side of things, and then of course the school and the team websites as well. And then just the last little bit. These are kind of the second phase of things. Like I said, I'll be doing more of these webinars throughout. Spike Mark, that's it. Thank you. Thanks, Brandon. Spike Mark is the new, once they get it together, like I said, they are struggling. So I've seen some of the results being posted on GolfStat here recently, but Spike Mark is the new tournament hub for all of the college results and stuff. But yeah, they had something got hacked or overloaded or something their first week of things. So, but this is the second half of the process, getting into especially post June 15th. So for some of you who may be in this process, I know some of you might have gotten on this and realized, oh, we're already past all of the stuff we talked about. Sorry if that's the case. Make sure you join some of the next webinars, because we'll be talking about some of these, which is getting more into coach communications, maintaining that communication with the coaches, being prepared for your calls. I do a lot of mock interviews with my girls, talk about things to expect when the coaches, when they're on calls with coaches, how to prepare for their visits, how to engage and impress the coaches, how to be themselves, really. We do a lot of that kind of stuff. And then making their decision. That part is easy for some because they may have that offer to the one place they want to go. Others get multiple offers and they can't decide where to go to. Others have a little bit of negotiation they have to do. But a lot of the ongoing part of the process, and the decision making, the coach communications, the visits, or in some cases you're past that initial piece, but you're just not getting the coach communication going because you're just not contacting the right places, or you're still working on your game and those kinds of things. So I'll talk a little bit more about this on some of the other webinars. But then also, I'll flip back to the original screen. So if you, I'm gonna flip back to the video here just to wrap up this last little bit. Then I said I will answer a couple of questions, got just a few minutes before we'll cut this off. If anyone wants to write any of this down, you can also find all my info if you follow me on my social media, pretty easy to reach, or through the PKB site as well. You can contact me through that as well. But I'm gonna stop sharing this for 1 minute, we're back to the video, back to my, like I said, my mess here. But before I do answer any questions, I did just want to let everybody know that if you are, I think they always have it listed as a Bell National member, or not Bell, I always want to say Bell National, a PKB National member. You do get the intro to college recruiting consultation. So reach out. Like I said, you'll get an email from me from this. You can reply back to that, or if you get anxious and want to go ahead and reach out to me, shoot me an email. We can set that up. So again, it's kind of what we did on this webinar. We would just make it a little bit more specific to where you or your daughter, depending on who's on here, is in the process, and kind of talk about it a little bit more specific to that. And then if you're interested in working with me and having me through the process, or if you need to get started with the process and you want help with getting your resume, the intro email, video, that kind of stuff together, or maybe setting up eval, spending time on the course together, not from an instruction perspective, but just getting a feel for where your game is, what your goals and expectations are, some things to work on both personally, and even kind of player development wise, just as far as that kind of course management, some of that stuff, and how that applies to that really kind of next level of playing golf. Reach out to me about that too. Lots of different ways to kind of do some of that. And then full-time programs that I work with girls throughout the whole process. Wrapping up with most all of my 24s, got a few more left to make their decisions. Actually just got a text message that one just made her decision or is getting ready to. Got a few more right on the very verge of it. And some 25s getting ready to. And so it'll be busy time this whole junior year with 2025s, and then the 26s, about that time for the 26s to start that communication with coaches. We really kind of spend a lot of junior year prepping for the June 15th date. Again, especially if you're kind of anywhere in and around, 80 and under average is really kind of where we start. If you're a current sophomore, that does do you some good to start doing some things recruiting wise, to get you ahead of the game and help you prepare for what might happen on June 15th. So again, anybody in those boats, reach out, shoot me a message. I'll give you the direction on what we can do, what to do next. But outside of that, just wanted to talk about that before we answer any questions. So if you have any questions, I got a few minutes to answer maybe 3 or 4 questions. Just type them in the chat box. We've got quite a few people on here. It's easier to just do them through the chat box. And I'll repeat the question, especially if you send it to me as a direct message, and answer a couple questions. As I drink some water because I've been talking nonstop for 50 minutes now. And I had a webinar earlier today that I did the same thing for about 45 minutes. Any questions out there? No questions. It's quiet. Everybody tired? Is it everybody? It's my bedtime. I'm usually in bed in the next like 20 minutes. I'm gonna have to let the dogs play for a little bit and wear themselves out so that they'll sleep. All right. Well, don't look like we have any questions. Okay. On NCAA registration, so do you include PKB stuff instead of high school scores? I don't think it matters which one. I always get asked stuff about NCAA eligibility, and to be honest, I hardly ever see the actual eligibility stuff just because all the girls got to fill it out. And so, like I said, I don't think it matters. You maybe just as easy because you're talking about for the eligibility center, I'm assuming. I mean, again, I don't think it matters just because your scores. Yeah, you might as well do both. I mean, your scores and what you're inputting on there, they're not looking for any reason from an eligibility center perspective. So, I mean, I hadn't had any girls ask me that. It's funny how I do stuff for so long and then I do get asked some question and I'm like, how have somebody not ever asked me that before? So yeah, I mean, I would just say probably put both. I don't think there's any reason to not do either. All right, let's see. Now all the questions are coming in. What SAT are schools looking for at D1, D2, and D3? I mean, that's very broad. I mean, that I'm going to give you the typical, it depends, but I mean, it really is for it. So I was asking, what SAT are schools looking for? It's going to be a very, very broad range. I mean, you've got some really high academic schools that are looking at, 1,300 and above. Your Ivy Leagues and your top academics are minimum 1,300. I mean, then you've got some, but probably one of the biggest things to keep in mind is if you go look at stuff online and you see average SAT or you see what it looks like to go in as a non-athlete, a lot of times athletes do have a little more flexibility, especially if you're a recruited athlete, not just like a walk-on or, preferred walk-on or something like that. Especially if you're a highly recruited athlete, there is some more flexibility for the athletes to get in with a little bit lower test score. But I said a lot of schools have gone test optional, don't require test. But I mean, I couldn't even begin to tell you because I mean, it is wide range of SAT scores for all ranges, D1, D2, D3. I mean, it can, that there's not even close to like a set number. Set of NAIA schools I would recommend in the Southeast. I mean, so some of them have been changing from NAIA to D2. Embry-Riddle, I mean, it's expensive down in Florida. I think it's still NAIA. USC Beaufort, I think still NAIA is another one. Those are 2 that I would recommend. Can't think of any others right now. Because again, unless some of them end up going, well, 2 that I can think of would be Embry-Riddle. It's aeronautical, but it has some other different majors. It's got a good women's coach. I definitely would recommend that from a women's coach perspective. USC Beaufort has a very Energetic is maybe a good word. There's a word for it, coach right now. But just a great little area. But I think he's still, I think they're still NAIA, I believe. Do we list all the tours the girls play on for? I mean, you can. I'm assuming the same thing for the eligibility center. AJJ, PKB State. Yeah, you can. I do know the eligibility center has a weird thing that asks about like other teams you've played on, which is not necessarily the same thing. There are a lot of times they're asking about teams that looking at other sports of like travel paid for teams that you want to say no, you haven't done because you're not playing on like these paid for like even like what other countries do where you're being paid to play kind of thing. But yeah, you can list I mean, you can list them all where it does ask that. Again, it's not something they're going to be overly picky about if you don't list every single one just because you played one tournament. Thoughts on having a mental coach? I mean, I definitely think it's helpful, especially for the girls. I think there's some different types of, there's mental, there's sports psychologists. Myself, I do a lot of mentorship side of things. There's even kind of somebody who's a little more on the course management side of things. So I think it's kind of what fits her and where she might struggle a little bit. I also do think probably one of the biggest things that I kind of tell everybody, I've got a lot of great relationships with mental coaches, 100% support what they do. Referred lots of girls to them. I think sometimes it maybe gets taken, and again, this is in no way whatsoever to take away because plenty of junior golfers need mental coaches. So this is not at all. This is just a complete reference to girls of that age and just complete, like, not even personal. I mean, it is personal preference. I think sometimes it's forgotten just how much these girls are still just the fact that they are teenagers and it's okay to be emotional. I'm not a very big supporter of the crying, emotional, part from a golf perspective. Just because I never was that way, but I do get that gotta give, and I tell the girls, you gotta give yourself a little bit of grace for the fact that like you are still maturing and developing and you don't have all the control over your emotions. Like you legitimately don't, as much as you want to control it, as much as you want to retain this information, you don't have all the experience. From a golf perspective, you don't have the ability sometimes to control your emotions and to do all of this. Your brain is literally still developing and growing and maturing. And I think sometimes understanding that, and I do think that is weird though, sometimes the mental coach or whatever player development, whatever it might be, can help aid in that for sure. But I think sometimes just understanding, not letting the girls sometimes understand that it doesn't mean there's something wrong with them. It's just saying that like, hey, this is going to help you maybe get there a little bit faster, maybe, and learn a little bit more besides continuing to make some of the same mistakes. So I think sometimes the girls go straight into thinking, and that was me too. And I think that was this like stigma about it, was that it means there's something wrong with you. And I do think there's some cases where there are some underlying, and again, that's where sometimes you get into the sports psychology thing where there's maybe some underlying things with anxiety or issues there. But I think understanding that it's not always because there's something wrong. And I think getting the girls to understand and really just giving themselves the grace that, this is just normal feelings for 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old girls. And just, again, trying to find that balance of trying to get better and improving, but yet there's only so much you can do to control your emotions and, what's going on with your body and your, all of that at that age as well. Yeah, I mean, ask about PSAT scores. I mean, they definitely help give a reference of where you're going to be. Not a ton of relevancy, but they can give some coaches a little bit of an idea, especially if you have a really high score. They can give a little bit of relevancy for what you might get, again, especially at some of the higher academic schools who may need it. Now, it's not going to carry any weight, but it can maybe just lean a coach a little bit of a way to say, all right, if she's got this, and she's probably at least going to be able to match what we need. And actually, I take that back. I say that at the higher academic schools, that they'll probably still have a hard time dictating it, but somewhere that needs just a minimum SAT or something, and you've pretty much hit at least that or above on your PSAT, kind of gives them that indication to at least know, hey, she's at least tested pretty decent. Where do you find the questionnaires? Most of them are on the website. Sometimes they're difficult to find. Sometimes just as simple as Googling the school, the team name, and questionnaire is sometimes just the easiest way to do it. So if you just put in Furman Women's Golf Questionnaire, sometimes it'll take you straight to it. Otherwise, if you just went to the Furman Women's Golf page, sometimes it's on the drop-down menu versus like actual headline. So sometimes it'll give you a more link or a recruiting link. But most of them are on the actual like women's golf page. There's a few smaller schools that just have one general athlete questionnaire, but most all of them have a women's golf specific questionnaire. And a lot of times, like I said, if you can't, just Google a team women's golf recruiting questionnaire, and usually you will find that. So again, yeah, like I said, it's typically each individual coach that has their own questionnaire for that specific sport. A few smaller schools and stuff may only have one actual questionnaire, and then within it you put what sport you're playing, and it'll go to that coach, but most of it is the actual program itself. So all right, well, with that, we're just past 9 o'clock. So thanks for all the questions, and thanks for everybody joining. Great discussion, conversation. I really appreciate everybody being on here. And again, if you've got my email, you can reach out. I will follow up with the recording tomorrow as well. So that'll give you another way to reach out. If you have any questions, you can head over to my Instagram, follow me. I post a lot of stuff over there too. I said I'll be out on site for some PKB events the rest of this year, a couple of them. But otherwise, hope to see everybody out. And if you have any questions, just reach out, and hope to see some of y'all out and about soon. But have a good night and a good rest of the week.